Hi, everyone. We are live and really excited about today's guest and the topic that we're going to be covering today. Of course, it's me here, your uh, your internet neighborhood Baptist with Nicholas
Hey, gang.
over there in Ireland, Presbyterian. We've been kind of having this running thing lately about whether we've had a guest Baptist or guest Presbyterian on, but today we're back to the Presbyterians. We've got Ben Zeisloft, an author of a new book, his debut book. We just found out this is his first book, and we're going to be talking about that in detail today. Thank you so much for being with us today, Ben.
Yeah, welcome, brother.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and by the way, as we talk today, some of these questions I sent questions to Ben that I wanted to ask, and we've got some challenging questions because this is a hefty topic. We're going to be talking about abortion. We're going to be talking about pro-life versus the abolition positions, and if people in the audience have questions, we do welcome those, because I think a big goal for this interview is not only for people to hear about the book, but to really probe deeply into why this topic needs to be thought through and how it needs to be addressed in today's current cultural climate. Because things are really changing rapidly. And I got that sense just from reading the book as to, just some of the major shifts that are taking place politically. And Ben's book really delves into these things in detail. So we're going to talk about that. We want to, of course, as always, just kind of start off acknowledging people from the audience and saying hello to everybody. And also just kind of giving people a chance to come in because as we go along here, more people are coming in. So just want to say hi, and great to see. See some people we recognize. Tony, of course, in England. Good to see you there.
Always first up.
Yeah, Colton. We've had him on
a couple of
times now from Texas, and then we've got Samantha there, and some guy whose last name is Frisch. that's good to see another Frisch. So that's my brother in there. So I know my brother has questions for you, Ben. I know, because he was talking to me a few days ago, and he definitely had questions. So that'll be good. Yeah. So we welcome people's questions. What I'm going to do is just start with some fun questions, because it turns out that each of us are kind of in a different generational category. I would be more of a Gen X. I think I would be kind of labeled in that generation. You guys are younger. So I'm going to ask just some questions. And people in the audience, if you want to answer these too, we'd like to get audience participation. I'd like to know from you guys. Now, Nicholas, you can refrain from answering this one if this doesn't apply well. But My question was which the first president of the United States that you remember? Who's the first? For me, that would be President Reagan. That's the president I remember as a child. I want to hear from you guys.
Well, I'll let our guest go first, because I'm obviously here in Ireland, so I'm trying to think who's the first one.
Can you think of any American presidents?
I can name quite a few. I'm just trying to remember who the first I would have actually known of. But Ben, we'll let you go first, brother.
I remember going to, it must have been 2004. It was a rally for George W. Bush with my parents. And then in 2008, we door knocked for John McCain. I remember that distinctly. That was one of my first forays into politics, actually.
Okay. I had a feeling you were going to say that. That's great. That's great.
Yeah,
so right there.
So that I got started early, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think mine's which one's senior? Which one's Bush senior? Is that W or
HW?
Okay.
Yeah, HW. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
You remember him, all right. Yeah. So that's past Reagan. So yeah, this is kind of what I could have predicted, I guess. How about a favorite show or movie that stands out to you from your childhood? For me, I'll give a movie, I guess. I remember I really liked the movie The Three Amigos, comedy movie with um, Martin Short, Steve Martin, Martin Short, and Chevy Chase.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you guys have heard of it? That's good.
Well, I know of it. Yeah, I haven't watched it, but
Oh, okay.
Colton says the Goonies. I don't know.
All right. Yeah.
I didn't
Colton,
watch
there you
a whole
go.
lot growing up, but probably Fresh Prince TV show.
Yeah. I remember the Star Wars prequels. So I remember being very upset in kindergarten because my dad wouldn't let my brother and I see Revenge of the Sith because it was too dark. So, but we enjoyed all the cartoons and all the rest.
That's perfect that you said that, because one of my other questions was, which of the Star Wars series is the best in your opinion? Between the first
original
episodes 4, 5, and 6, the prequels, and then the sequels recently. These are very controversial topics that I'm bringing up here. So, I mean, obviously, I like the original. That doesn't surprise you guys. What about you guys?
I've said mine's is the originals. I did not like.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear
2
that.
or 3, and the modern ones are woeful.
Yeah, the sequels are obviously trash, the ones that Disney made in the past decade or so, but the prequels for me are my favorites. The parts where they're not sitting around in a semicircle and talking. But I distinctly love the, I think it was like a series of Clone Wars cartoons that came out between episodes 2 and 3.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So those were really good. My brother and I watched that so much when we were little. I probably have every frame of that memorized, even still today. But
that's awesome.
I've actually watched that myself. I do quite enjoy it.
Yeah.
I see here we've got Colton with the original, Samantha named Dumb and Dumber previously.
Thank you for pointing those out, paying attention to that. Yeah, Dumb and Dumber.
That's from here.
Yeah. Oh, do you know this one, Nicholas?
Mm-hmm.
Magic Roundabout?
It's a kids' TV show over here in the UK and Ireland, yeah.
Never heard of that.
I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe it was a BBC production.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, another question for you guys. What kind of computer did you have as your first computer?
Wow, man.
My first laptop was a 90s ThinkPad. I still have it. I think it still boots up, but it weighs about 200 to 300 pounds, I would say.
Mm.
Oh wow!
Yeah, maybe not quite that much, but I mean those things were really heavy, but super well made for sure.
I don't know what mine would
I think it was a Pentium 133. So
yeah, I don't know what mine would be. I didn't really have a phone or a computer till later on in life, so
I'll just put my brother's. That's right. Actually, I remember that one, Alan. The Atari 800 XL. You guys have heard of Atari, though.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Ben, what about you, brother?
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, what about you? What's your first laptop or computer?
Yeah, sure. I don't know what brand it was, but I remember playing on the massive, boxy desktop computers with the separate, hard drive sort of thing. I remember my first laptop was when I was a little kid. My parents just gave me a hand-me-down MacBook that was disconnected from the internet. It had Word and Excel on it, and I thought that was the biggest deal in the world. But that was probably my first laptop, just some kind of MacBook, some old MacBook.
MacBook, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's interesting because when I was young, there were no such thing as MacBooks. So
right.
that's interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
So what about I wanted to ask this question too, Ben, because you're from Pennsylvania.
Correct. Yes.
So I was going to bring up sports because I'm from New Jersey originally, and I'm actually a big I like Philadelphia teams, actually. I grew up rooting for them, and I still love the Phillies. Do you follow any of those teams, or?
Not really. No, I'm not a huge professional sports guy. I'll follow the Steelers if they're in the playoffs or something, but other than that, not really.
Oh, okay. Now, are you more from Western Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so I grew up in Pittsburgh. Grew up outside Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Yep, but currently living outside Philly.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So you never went to any games then?
I've been to a handful of games, but I just don't watch it that closely.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, like, but I was gonna ask, like, what's the first stadium you went to? Like, if you could remember what that one would be.
Yeah, probably Heinz Field in Pittsburgh. Yeah,
Yeah.
where the
Okay,
Steelers play. Yep.
I think
okay.
Tim, maybe just before this person leaves us again, because they said they're
Oh,
not staying for long. If you could pull up Tanner's comment, just a message to Ben.
I saw that. Yeah, thank you, Tanner. Appreciate
There
that.
we go. Yeah. Just hopping on for a quick minute. I am immensely excited for Ben's book to come out. I've been looking for a good abolitionist resource to give to my wife's co-workers at her local pregnancy center. Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, and our good friend at the Foundation to Abolish Abortion, Jenna Cross, has several. She and her husband run several pregnancy centers in Wisconsin, Minnesota. I think they just opened one in Tennessee. But she's a great resource for a pregnancy center director who supports equal protection and abolition. And she's actually spoken a lot about the temptations that the pregnancy center movement has toward being softer on the gospel, just becoming a humanitarian charity, divorced from the Christian faith. So she's a great resource for that. She's on X. You could probably find her pretty easily.
What was her name again? Sorry, brother.
Jenna Cross. So Ginna
Okay.
Cross. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
all right. We're just about to get into the book in more detail. I guess the one other question I'll ask you guys is, when you were young, like, do either of you have like a recollection of a church using like King James Bible? Did both of you have that experience? Because I know I did when I was young. King James was the only one we used. That's changed a lot though over the years. So I was curious for you guys, like what your experience was with that versus like what does your church currently use?
Yeah, no, it's I grew up with most churches being King James. Now it's more modern translations, but Ben.
Interesting.
Yeah, the
Interesting.
church I grew up in used the NIV, so went to more of a larger mega church. They use NIV, and then the church we are currently members at uses ESV. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. When I was young, a lot of churches were still using the King James. Even some people would pray like using thee and thou when they would pray. So that's changed a lot. And
Yeah.
you're at, is it called 10th Presbyterian Church?
yeah, that's correct. Yep.
In Philadelphia.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. So you're in Philadelphia. That's why I brought up Philadelphia, because I thought that's where you're located, but you're originally not from Philadelphia.
Correct.
Okay.
Trying to convert him, Tim.
I am. I was hoping maybe, I could get another person to like Philadelphia teams with me here.
Yep.
All right. So on to the book. Forsakers of the Fatherless, the Secret Treachery of the Pro-Life Establishment. I mean, that's a very non-controversial title you have there, Ben.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us about this title and what you're ultimately kind of getting at in this book?
And also, Ben, just for some of our audience that maybe aren't familiar with you, give us a little bit about you as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm Ben Zeisloft. I'm the communications director for the Foundation to Abolish Abortion. I've spent the past several years as well writing for various conservative news outlets. So the Daily Wire is where I got my starts. Also, the Republic Sentinel for the past 2 years. That's just winding down, but also a variety of outlets. Campus Reform when I was in college. The Spectator, the Western Journal still contribute there from time to time. So that's sort of what I do is Christian journalism, but more recently transitioning into full-time work in the abolition movement with Foundation to Abolish Abortion. So we are the main legislative group. We write most of the equal protection bills that go in across the country. We advocate for them. My job is to generate media coverage around them and bring the conversation to the public square as much as possible about what we're trying to advance. But as far as the book goes, so the reason I chose this title is because Psalm 68:5 has been one of my favorite verses when it comes to opposing abortion for the past several years, really. So it says, Father to the fatherless and protector of widows is God in his holy habitation. So it's God revealing himself as the one who looks out for fatherless children. A fatherless child is somebody who doesn't have a father to protect them from physical threats, to lead them, guide them, provide for them. And every child murdered by abortion is definitionally a fatherless child. The vast majority of the time, either it's the father conceived the baby in a one night stand and has no idea he or she even exists, or the father is even paying for the abortion, driving the woman to the abortion clinic, ordering the abortion pills for her, maybe even coercing her, pressuring her into having an abortion. So that's what Christians are called to do, is to be fathers to fatherless children in our culture and stand in that gap. But a lot of the pro-life groups, the pro-life establishment groups that we've for a long time trusted to do that have forsaken that role. They've actually opposed legislation and good faith efforts to finally establish that justice for the fatherless. So that's why I named the book in this way. That's not an unfounded allegation. I prove it across 8 chapters, 50,000 words. It's not that long of a book, but there's certainly a lot of meat to it. But this is a conclusion that you'll reach, hopefully, if you pick up this book and look at it. I'm not out of bounds here.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's really good overview, and I will certainly put. I'm going to put the chapters up and kind of let you just break down the basic structure of the book. Before I do that, though, we already have audience question here from Tony. I'm pro-life, but what about if not terminating would result in the death of the mother and child? I think we should go ahead and just tackle that kind of question, because people are always wondering about that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts, Ben?
Yeah, that's a common one. I would basically say that as long as the doctor is treating both mother and baby like human beings made in God's image, there are, of course, situations of medical triage where you can't say both, and we leave that to the discretion of the doctor. As long as he or she is actually treating both like human beings, not seeing the baby in the womb as a clump of cells that's without value or purpose, then I think we're good to go. That we're in a fallen world. That kind of situation does happen sometimes. It's not nearly as often as people make it out to be, but it's not wrong in certain cases to induce a delivery of a baby, maybe a little bit earlier than you would have intended, and maybe the baby dies in that process. But if that's truly the only way to save the mother, that's acceptable, even under equal protection legislation.
Mm-hmm. And is that, would you say, and something we should spell out right away? We're going to be talking about pro-life, which has its own definition, abolition. We'll get into those definitions. Do you put yourself in a specific category? Yeah. Okay. And what is that?
Yeah, so I'm an abolitionist. I believe in the immediate and total abolition of all abortion. Yes.
Okay, so what you just spelled out there, that view, is that typical of the position of abolitionists?
Yeah, that's correct. So I guess I can distinguish between abolition and pro-life a little bit. So pro-life is obviously the word we use in our culture to describe opposing abortion or being for human life in the womb. So when I say pro-life establishment and things like that, I don't mean the everyday pro-life Christian who sincerely does want to end abortion, but just happens to use that term or whatever the case may be. So I want to make that clear from the outset too. But an abolitionist basically looks at God's word and says, how does God treat, civil justice, national repentance, some of those issues, and then tries to apply that in our civic life today as it stands. And one of my contentions in the book, and that that a lot of abolitionists will rightly say, is that for a very long time, the establishment pro-life movement, the mainstream pro-life movement, has not tried to do that. They've tried to be politically pragmatic in ways that actually do actively deviate from God's word and the principles in his law that you pick up from Moses, from the prophets, on how to actually treat something like child sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And by the way, as we're talking about this, the book is available for pre-order currently, right?
That's correct.
When does it come out?
It should be out in early August, so I just got my first copies, and they should be shipping the rest pretty soon here.
Okay. And I wanted to remember to let all of you know that there is a special offer. I apologize, Ben, that's cutting out your face for the moment. but it's a code here that you're able to use in honor of our co-host, Layman Apologist. Use the code Layman at founderspress.org or press.founders.org because this book is produced by Founders Press, and you'll get 10% off of the price of the book if you use the code Layman.
Which is very generous. So thank you.
Yeah, very generous for them to do that. And that's pretty interesting that you're publishing with them. Did they specifically ask you to do this? How did that kind of come about?
Yeah, so I was working on the book already, so I sent the introduction and I think 1 or 2 chapters to a handful of publishers, and Founders was a natural fit. They Tom Askell, the president of Founders, has been a warrior for abolition for several years now. So he was, and I didn't want a publisher that was going to censor the book or try to play it down, and Founders didn't do that at all. They were great throughout the entire process. So it was an excellent choice to go with them.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I've actually did a interview about abolition. I think it was 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago, and it was someone I knew out in Oklahoma, who is part of church and the movement out there. And yeah, the Baptists have been early adopters of this whole ideology for sure. So there you go, Baptists leading the way in many ways on this. But glad to see that they were able to publish this work with you. Now, let me also just show everybody here the table of contents, and maybe just give us kind of the breakdown of what you're doing with these chapters. I mean, obviously, you're not going to get into all the details of every chapter, but how is this book structured, and what are you trying to do as kind of the overview of this book?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so the foreword is written by Dusty Devers, Senator Dusty Devers from Oklahoma. That alone is worth the price of admission. So that's the only part of the book that actively, argues for abolition, polemically, so to speak, or theologically. The rest is journalism, history, evidence, trying to show you that this is actually the pattern throughout the country: is Christians being risen up, being converted, being convicted on the issue of abortion, and then trying to do something about it. Usually starting with maybe going to the abortion mills to minister, and then going into state politics, recognizing that really it's the job of the civil magistrate to actually fully end this and make it illegal. And then they're opposed by none other than the pro-life groups. And then it gets into all the evidence to support that: public statements, legislation. It shows you what's actually in these bills. So I think one of the greatest things that any Christian can do is just read pro-life bills, and you'll see how far they actually do deviate from something like what God says, how God says we should treat murder. So that's what I'm trying to do with these books. You'll notice with these chapters, rather, you notice most of those states are pretty deep red states. So, Texas, Louisiana, Kentucky, these are not states where the Democrats really have any meaningful power politically. There's a couple swing states. There's North Carolina, Arizona. But for the most part, these are deep red states. And you would think one of these states is probably going to be the ones who can actually get this done. And yet, even still in those states, the pro-life establishment is the main obstacle to ending abortion fully.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I've noticed for this is, because I'm becoming more familiar with your work since we found out you were coming on, which is great. So someone I've followed for a while is Jeff Durbin, End Abortion Now, and I know they're trying something similar in Arizona. Are you familiar with Jeff and End Abortion Now, or have you done any work with them?
Yeah, absolutely. We work very closely with End Abortion Now over at Foundation to Abolish Abortion. And so the Arizona chapter is based around an interview with a man named Dennis Sarfate. So he's a former MLB pitcher, actually, pretty accomplished Major League Baseball player. And he goes to Apologia Church. He works closely with Jeff and Luke Pearson, Zach Conover, those guys. So I kind of tell the story of what happened in Arizona through his eyes, largely.
Awesome. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, so I notice you're really approaching this from like specific events and things that are happening in different states in the political sphere, and I think I heard you just kind of contrast there the abolition movement and the efforts there with pro-life, because kind of what you're saying as a premise here is that pro-life has actually been kind of an obstacle to the actual goals of eradicating abortion. Is that right?
Yeah, in a lot of ways. So again, I'm not saying every single person, individual believer who calls himself pro-life is the problem here. I'm saying that the groups, institutions, the ideology is what's at fault in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm. And I'm getting the sense that it has to do with the shift of kind of the mindset shift that for so long we were in kind of this defensive posture on the issue, that now it's like a struggle to realize, hey, this is the time to go on the offense, right? Because Roe v. Wade has been overturned, And there's now for you, were you like pro-life at one point and then came to say, oh yeah, I see now the problem and I want to be part of the abolition movement? How did that happen?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents are both solid believers. My mom was always involved in counseling women who went to the pregnancy center our church was supporting. So I knew from a very early age that abortion was wrong. I knew that I was pro-life. It wasn't a huge, obstacle to understand that murdering a baby in the womb is a problem. But it wasn't until later. So I think I was converted my freshman year of college. But in any case, God was working on me through my childhood. But a year or two after my conversion, I started really listening to Jeff Durbin actually, and some other abolitionists who were kind of bringing up this problem of we're trying to introduce bills to end abortion in these states, and yet we're getting opposed by people who call themselves pro-life. And then so I kind of had it in the back of my mind for a few years while I was getting more involved with things like going to the abortion mills in Philadelphia and doing sidewalk ministry. So kind of knew, okay, there's this problem with these big pro-life groups. But really, my mind really was changed by the guys at Abolitionist Rising, which used to be called Free the States. I met them in Nashville when they were at the SBC convention, and I was interning at Daily Wire, actually. And over a card game of Secret Hitler, got to know them a little bit and started listening to the Liberator podcast, and that really laid out biblically, why abolition is the way to go. So that's really what changed my mind and brought me fully into the movement.
Awesome.
That's good. And if we have time, we might talk a little bit more about Abolitionists Rising. Or toward the end, you could let people know how they could find that information too.
Yeah.
But just to keep on topic here, maybe with these states here, I don't know if you have any examples you want to give us of the types of things you're describing here. Because again, I think one of the big things that's going to be hard for people, especially if they're not in their 20s like you, is, pro-life is good. Why in the world would we be criticizing pro-life? What are some examples?
Yeah, so just
that you could.
Sorry, Tim.
Yeah, go ahead, Nicholas.
Just going to say, just before you touch on that would actually tie directly into Leslie's question as well. So, if you maybe want to
exactly, yes, I mean that's literally the question that she's asking here is, I'm not understanding how pro-life groups are hindering abolition. Can you explain? So yes, I think he's going to give us some examples here of what he's talking about.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And you're right, it's pretty shocking to a lot of people because we associate pro-life is good. Pro-life means you want to end abortion. I'll go to Louisiana first, since that's an example that maybe some people are familiar with. So 3 years ago, there was a pastor in Louisiana named Brian Gunter. So he's been involved in the pro-life movement and the abolition movement for decades, ever since he was in seminary, going to the abortion mills, saving babies. And then he was working at Louisiana Right to Life on the part-time basis, trying to mobilize the church with the political realm and trying to pass bills to save babies. So he was convinced also that equal protection, abolition was the way to go, not merely regulating the circumstances of abortion, things of that nature. So he proposed a bill, and this is what equal protection legislation does. It just extends the already existing murder, assault, wrongful death laws to protect preborn babies in the womb. So, of course, if we're saying that born and preborn people are both made in God's image, equally valuable, equally precious in His sight, then the same exact laws should protect both of us, both classes of people, in the same exact way, because there's no real distinction besides size, development, location, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. So when he did that, it passed committee. It was like a 7-2 vote in committee because, again, Louisiana is a deep red state. And between that time when it was in committee and when it went to the House floor in Louisiana, a letter was published by over 70 pro-life organizations, state and national, from around the country, saying that any law to criminalize that would effectively criminalize women for willfully murdering her preborn child should be opposed. We maybe get into that later, the whole second victim narrative discussion. But in any case, a bill simply saying, apply the same laws to protect all of us who are born to those who are preborn was killed not by Democrats, not by Planned Parenthood, but by pro-life Republicans, pro-life national organizations, names you'd recognize like National Right to Life, Susan B. Anthony, those sorts of groups. So again, that's a concrete example, and the whole book is full of them. But that's a very common pattern. It's not a weird one-off situation. These groups are actively opposing equal justice, equal protection for the preborn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's Louisiana. What would be another one here? I mean, we've got everything from Oklahoma to Kentucky.
Yep.
Sure. Yeah, I'll go to Texas next. So Texas is top of mind right now because we're in the middle of a special session in Texas, and Foundation to Abolish Abortion has active legislation in that. So there's a group in Texas called Texas Alliance for Life. So again, it sounds like any other pro-life group. And for the past several sessions, I think probably 3 or 4 sessions at this point, they have opposed and tried to work against any equal protection abolition legislation that's been introduced. So a recent example of that was just this April, a couple months ago. There was a bill, House Bill 2197, I believe, that was scheduled for a committee hearing, and it was canceled the day before because Joe Poyman, the president of that group, Texas Alliance for Life, convinced the committee chair to not hear the bill. And that's the reason it died. It wasn't because of Planned Parenthood. It wasn't because Planned Parenthood actually came and tried to take credit for it, but it wasn't them that did it. It was a pro-life establishment leader, one of the most powerful pro-lifers in the state of Texas, was the one who killed that bill to establish equal protection for preborn babies.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's a question for you. So don't allow me to put words in your mouth here because I'm still working through your book.
Sure.
But would it be fair to say then that these pro-life groups that are standing in the way of these abolition bills being passed, would it be fair to say that your take then on that would be they almost do so out of fear of losing votes or losing power? Would that be correct?
That's a big part of it, yeah. So one of the main excuses we'll hear is, we have the midterms next year. We can't abolish abortion because, we're going to lose seats in the House. That's actually what Speaker Mike Johnson said in response to the Louisiana bill. Is he said we're going to lose pro-life conservative seats in the Louisiana legislature. And again, Louisiana is deep red. They're not going to lose their majority or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the excuse that's brought up. But again, we're after 50 plus years of legalized abortion, somehow you have to get around to it. So in the U.S., we have elections every 2 or 4 years. That can't just be a perpetual excuse of not losing seats. You have to actually do something with the power once you gain it. Mm-hmm. So it's political cowardice. It's trying to play 5-dimensional chess instead of just doing what God says, on trying to honor Him, and then trusting Him with the results.
Mm. Okay. Hopefully that clears. Sorry, Tim.
Yeah, the book gives a few justifications toward the beginning.
Yeah, there's more.
Yeah, so the first justification is submission to Roe and other federal court decisions or statutes. That would be one reason. Another one is political pragmatism, which kind of ties into what Ben was just saying, the desire to win elections. And then the third justification is opposition to criminalizing mothers who have abortions.
Right.
Yeah, and I could see where, that would be off-putting to people. Do you want to comment on that as far as what is the position on criminalizing women in the abolition movement?
Yeah. So again, these bills merely say just apply the exact same murder, assault, wrongful death laws that protect born people to protect preborn people as well. So that would mean that any woman who willfully murders a baby and that can be proven in a court of law would face penalties under the law, just as if she had murdered her 1-year-old, which we all agree, she should face penalties for that. So a lot of pro-life groups will say that women are victims of abortion, categorical victims of abortion. And they'll say for that reason, we should have in our laws, exceptions saying that a woman can never be prosecuted for having an abortion. To which we would say, of course, there are some women who, are coerced into it, are pressured into it, meaningfully too. Not just my mom told me to do it, or implied that there'd be consequences if I didn't. But like life in limb, or maybe there's the abortion bill. Those sorts of things happen. We want to acknowledge that. But the vast majority of the time, it is the woman who's either initiating or willfully participating in the death of her own baby. And it's to the extent that it's 1 in 4 women of reproductive age in the United States who has had at least one abortion, which is shocking. So there's clearly a big problem. And again, a lot of these pro-life states actually have in their current law, any pro-life law that they have on the books will have a clause saying, none of this actually applies to the mother. So the mother who willfully has an abortion. So it's a massive loophole that's allowing things like self-managed abortion, self-induced abortion, abortion pills to continue. And it's defended by none other than a lot of these pro-life groups who are maybe they're trying to show compassion, but again, they're conflating categories, not really, balancing mercy with justice very well, which I think Christians can and should do.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. And I think
that being, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Tim. I was going to say, I think you already touched on it there anyway, brother, but you do make it clear in the book. You do talk about there being exceptions for, as you say, coercion or true actual ignorance of what. Now, am I right with that second one, or?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a legal concept called mistake of fact. So you can if you can somehow prove that a woman legitimately didn't know that it's a baby in her womb, then sure. But again, I would say pretty much all women do know
Yeah,
that it's
yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, that seems to me a pretty challenging issue in the sense that not so much ideologically. Like for me, I see where you're coming from with that, because it's murder and you're being consistent. But even in murder cases that we do acknowledge, it can be really complicated as to how to prosecute
right,
and how to apply guilt. So a lot of things would have to get fleshed out concerning what would actually be the penalties and how do you verify the culpability in each specific situation. That sounds pretty complicated. Um,
right.
but the other, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll make clear too. So these laws that I'm talking about in the book, or that Foundation to Abolish Abortion supports, they're not really trying to make those determinations. They're just saying, apply the existing laws already on the books that already handle those sorts of questions. So, of course, there's different degrees of murder. There's mitigating factors of was somebody severely pressured, or is this their eighth abortion? And we leave that to prosecutors, juries, courts to decide that. So just to your point real quickly, yeah, that's already been thought of. And, we're not trying to woodenly just say, here's the exact penalty that must apply if an abortion happens. We already have this legal system for a reason, and it works. It's not perfect, but it works. And that's how we actually deter murder from happening is just applying the exact same laws that are already on the books.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Yeah.
I think, Tim, just if I could jump in here quickly, I think a lot of people that are newer to hearing this type of argument do panic because they think, okay, right, well, you're now just saying like these laws should be applied across the board. Who
Right.
determines it? All those sorts of things. So let me tie this into the question. You wrote this book. Who's your primary audience then for this book? Who do you want it in the hands of most?
Yeah, absolutely. So sort of the person described toward the beginning, just the average pro-life Christian who sincerely wants to end abortion, doesn't like abortion, knows that God calls it murder and wants to do something about it. I think that's the sort of person who may be giving to these pro-life establishment groups, assuming that they're actually trying to do that, to actually obey God and end abortion. And in many cases, they're not. So that's just the alarm bell I'm trying to ring here with this book.
Got it.
Mhm.
Got it. That sounds good, brother.
And just to follow up with what we were just talking about too, I appreciate you saying that, because that's good to know that there are existing laws and different nuances that have already been worked out. I would imagine, if this gains momentum, then there's going to be clarity established through the courts on how to apply these things.
Right.
Because that is a complicated issue. That the legal situation of the mother. I think the doctors is a little more clear cut from most people's standpoint. I would imagine the pro-life movement, there's probably a good amount of them that would say, yeah, we could see the. Now, what does the pro-life stance usually say about doctors? Do they think that they should be criminalized?
Yeah, I think so. I think the vast majority of even the most pro-life establishment people would recognize that you can and should bring criminal charges against doctors who are murdering tens of thousands of babies throughout the course of their career. There is one example, and I think it's in either the Arizona or Oklahoma chapter, but the chairman of Oklahomans for Life, I believe that is what the group is called. Tony Lowinger is his name. He actually argued on Apologia Radio with Jeff Durbin. He was sort of hesitant to say that the abortionist is actually killing babies, and that's one of the reasons why we now have End Abortion Now as a group, is because they're seeing just how deep the compromise does run with some mainstream pro-lifers, and that's not representative of all of them. I completely acknowledge that, but that sort of thing does exist. That they're not even sure how to treat the abortionist, which is pretty shocking.
Yeah, it's really a mentality shift, because there are so many people that are just thinking that what we have to deal with is the scrutiny and the opposition of what we've faced for so many decades. And I kind of what I hear you saying is there's a whole opportunity here to shift the narrative and the way of thinking on it. And that's really now with that being said, I think another legitimate issue is all the reasons you listed that people might be opposed. One of the ones that I was thinking about, though, another one would be that stricter laws can actually correlate with increased abortions. It actually seems like toward the beginning of your book, that almost seems to be the case, that in some states where it's gotten stricter, abortion has actually increased. And so I guess the question there is, well, what about that issue and people who are saying, actually, we'll see a much more of an increase much more of a decrease in abortions if we take a less aggressive track on this.
Yeah.
What's
So
your
to be
thought?
clear, so to be clear, the laws under which there are more abortions, because that's happening in most red states right now, are pro-life regulations. They're not actually abolition efforts. So we're talking about heartbeat bills and bills that just go after the doctor but leave legal immunity intact for the mother. So if you actually look at how abortions are happening right now in much of the country, especially red states, Republican states, it's not obviously the abortion clinics, because most of those have been shut down, but it's abortion pills, it's telehealth abortions, it's going to other states to have abortions. Those are now the driving factors through which abortion is happening. And there's a reason for that. It's because the pro-life laws have loopholes allowing all that to happen legally. As long as the mother herself does it, it's completely legal. So going back to Texas, I believe there's 30,000 abortions per year just from telehealth pill abortions. And those are just the ones in the formal medical system. We're not even counting the ones that are self-managed outside the medical system. And that's a colossal problem. So just because the mills are shut down does not mean the pills are not still flowing into the states. And the only reason really to handle that is to prosecute those who are ordering the pills into the state, right? Because a lot of these abortion doctors are in states like New York, California, where they're covered by shield laws. There's a whole legal drama playing out right now with Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, trying to bring lawsuits against, I believe it's a doctor in New York, and New York State is just shutting him down over and over again. So really, even still, there are groups outside the United States entirely. So in Netherlands and India that are famously sending abortion pills into red states. So there's no way to prosecute them unless we want to send in the military, which maybe that's an option, honestly. But in any case, these states can pretty obviously solve the problem just by prosecuting people in their own jurisdictions that are willfully ordering these pills into the state to commit murder, right? Mm-hmm. This is what we're talking about here, is murder. But they're not willing to do that, and that's why we're seeing abortions rise. So as long as you have a bill that doesn't have a massive loophole like that and just treats it as murder, you're going to see that decrease.
I can see what you're saying. My only pushback to that would be then, would there be kind of what we're seeing with places where they have limited abortion techniques? People will actually be incentivized to travel to go to the places where they can. Plus, how, with pills, that is it seems to me incredibly hard to enforce.
Sure.
So it's not so much that I disagree with your position. I just have so many questions as to how do you make this work. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So even if an abolition bill passes, even when I should say an abolition bill passes, we're still going to have people trying to circumvent the law and do it quietly and things of that nature. So in order to actually investigate a murder, you need probable cause. So there have to be some kind of evidence to actually go after a mother and father who willfully murdering their own baby in the womb. So maybe it's an order from the receipt from the abortion pill provider that comes up. Maybe a friend tells the police, "Hey, my friend is just murdered her baby. You need to look into this. I have text messages that prove this beyond, prove there's a strong likelihood of this happening." Or maybe the father of the baby says, my girlfriend is determined to murder my baby, my son or daughter in the womb, and you need to stop that. So those sort of things we'll see happen once one of these bills passes, but it's not going to be in all cases. There's going to be people who inevitably get around the law, just like drug laws, right? People manage to do cocaine and smoke marijuana, even though those things are technically illegal. So it's going to matter. Enforcement's a huge issue. You're right. And it's going to other states to murder babies. That's why we need abolition in all 50 states and federally, is because if just crossing a border and doing it there is going to be a loophole, then that's a huge issue. So I fully acknowledge that for sure.
Yeah, and so would there be an initiative on some sort of federal level?
Yeah,
Probably?
there is. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So those are in the works, and Abolitionist Rising has been leading the conversation on that. So they're calling for the enforcement of the Comstock laws to stop the flow of abortion pills. We should enforce, the fact that we have the 14th Amendment, which establishes equal protection for all people at all levels of government. That's, of course, in the U.S. Constitution. So there are things federally that can be done that even the Republican Party, even the Trump administration is not doing, that should be done.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So one question that came up here from Leslie is, does your group help support adoption for those that cannot afford the usually huge upfront costs? So yeah, if you want to talk about adoption a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. So it's funny that this question comes up because I was just talking about this with our president, Bradley Pierce, yesterday. But the reason adoptions are so expensive is because of supply and demand, right? So there's so many people who want to adopt, and there's a shortage of people who are giving their babies up for adoption because they're just murdering them. It's more convenient to just murder your baby than give it up for adoption. So really, just adoption is great. Adoption is wonderful. It's a great way to image the gospel. I don't think it's a solution to abortion. I don't in sidewalk ministry for the past 6 years. If you say, and we do say this to the women we meet, is there are families who are on standby willing to adopt your baby. It's very rare that they actually want to go through with that. Really, what's driving people toward abortion is convenience and prosperity. They just want to go back to their life. They don't want the responsibility of having a baby or even carrying a baby for 9 months, and that's what's really driving that. So, adoption is wonderful, and we should support that. But in terms of actually seeing that as a solution to abortion, that's not really going to work, unfortunately. And I'll say too about Foundation to Abolish Abortion. We're not really a charity so much. We're a political advocacy group. We write legislation. That's sort of where our purview is. There are other groups that do charity. I mentioned one pregnancy center director, Jenna Cross, and there's other great pregnancy help organizations across the country that do that sort of thing.
So you work with other groups that have other initiatives, other goals that kind of work in tandem with what your goal is, even if it's not the exact same aim that you're trying to achieve. Your goal is abolition.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there, all these groups that I'm mentioning so far are abolition minded, but they might not be pigeonholed into legislation and that sort of thing as we are. So we'll refer people to them and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's one of the questions that I was thinking about was, what about those who are championing pregnancy centers? I've seen that in my local community where how Christian pregnancy centers can be very effective on the issue of abortion because you're meeting the mothers right in that crisis moment. Right. And I think it's important for people to remember that, because your book is focused on something very narrow in a sense. But you're not, I don't think you're saying get rid of Christian pregnancy centers, right?
Oh, of course not. No. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's no contrast between Christian mercy and Christian justice. So, the same Christian who tries to abolish abortion and classify it as murder in the laws can just as easily turn around and provide housing or medical support or financial needs for a mom who does want to keep her baby but is struggling. But still, my contention is I don't think the pregnancy centers are great, but they're not going to actually end abortion because it's not really the reason why people are pursuing abortion. People are pursuing it because of idolatry, because they don't want a baby. They don't, they don't want the responsibility. They want to stay in college. They want to continue in their career. There are some women who are maybe tempted toward it because they do have significant difficulties in their life, and those are the sorts of people that pregnancy centers help, and they should keep doing that. Even after abortion is abolished, but just recognizing objectively that that's not really going to solve the whole issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at with that. I mean, I do think, obviously those involved in the pregnancy centers might argue a little bit more toward, yes, we have actually helped so many women, but you're saying that's a certain subset of the total number of women who are having abortions. I get what you're saying there. Again, in my local community, because we don't even have percentage-wise as many college-educated people where I live than in other parts of the country. So there are plenty of young women in crisis here that really have been helped by pregnancy centers. But the good thing about pregnancy centers, Christian ones, is that even if there's abolition, there's still a use for pregnancy centers,
Yeah.
because women need support and help in crisis situations, and pregnancy centers can still continue to function. So I like that there's really ultimately there's no reason for there to be any kind of animosity toward each other.
Right. Yeah.
But it sounds like in the pro-life movement, on the political level, there has been some animosity, which is kind of the premise of the book.
Mm.
So,
Well, that ties
do
into
you,
a question I have.
yeah, what's your question,
Yeah,
Nicholas?
yeah. So one of the questions I'd written down for you, Ben, was if one of these pro-life leaders from any of the big pro-life organizations picks up your book, what's one thing you want them, or maybe more than one thing, but what's the main thing you want them to come away with from your book, and what change would you hope your book's going to help inspire in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Number one, stop killing our bills. When we submit a bill in a pro-life state, it'd be great if they didn't actively try to subvert it immediately, and maybe at the very least, said let's just see if they can get anywhere, even if they don't agree with the approach or whatever the case may be. Why would you counter signal a bill that's trying to fully end abortion? It just doesn't really make any
Mhm.
sense. But really, I think the main takeaway that I'm setting this book to several pro-life leaders I know who are pretty high up in national organizations.
Mhm.
The main takeaway I want people to see is, God does speak to this in His Word. God does speak to child sacrifice. He speaks to principles of justice, not showing partiality, establishing justice, what that actually looks like in practice. And I would submit, a lot of these pro-life efforts are maybe they start from the right place. Maybe they're trying to be pragmatic and save as many babies as we can. But really, at some level, they're opposing what God has objectively said in His Word concerning how we're supposed to go about this. And there are explicit commands, chapters like Isaiah 10, Psalm 94, that do forbid the writing of iniquity into law. And I would say a lot of pro-life laws do that by making carve-outs for a certain class of people to kill babies, by banning some methods of killing babies and explicitly allowing others. These are not bills that actually align with the character and nature of God as the father to the fatherless. So I hope that a lot of maybe pro-life establishment types who pick up this book do actually see that.
Okay, and then a follow up to that would be then, what would so from your position then for these pro life groups, what would restoration and repentance for these pro life
Yeah.
groups look for? Like, is it a complete backing down of, like you've said, killing the bills and
Yeah, I'll point to Abby Johnson's a good example of this, who's come a very long way. So 5, 6, 7 years ago, she was vehemently opposed to penalties for women. She was one of the people saying, we should never criminalize women. We should show compassion. But she herself is a post-abortive mother. She's killed 2 of her own children, and she supported our bill in Texas earlier this year, our equal protection bills, and she said, no, of course there should be criminal penalties. Because if it was illegal when I had done it, I wouldn't have done it. So I guess publicly, not just course correcting, but repenting, saying I was wrong to promote these bills is what we'd like to see for sure, and that would be a great step forward.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, brother.
Yeah. So with trying to interact with the pro-life movement, and obviously there have been some run-ins. I mean, that's what the book's addressing in many ways. One of the things that I think does come up, and it comes up in the book, is a lot of pro-life people are concerned about the issue of rape and incest, and you're positing your view as it's about promoting a biblical viewpoint, but some would say, well, it is biblical to consider these situations. I mean, incest is a really rough situation. So I want you to kind of be able, because I can understand how there would be an immediate reaction, again, for people who all their life have been thinking in one way. How do you reframe that issue and get to think along an abolitionist viewpoint on the issue specifically of rape and as well as incest?
Right. I would say that we should kill the rapist and not the baby. I think we should apply the death penalty to the person who raped somebody and not the baby who is conceived in that rape. without his or her willingness to do so. Right, the baby can't choose the circumstances of his or her conception. That's not a thing that happens. So our laws should target those who are doing these sorts of things to women, so that there's much less of it. That's why we're told in places like Ecclesiastes 8 that we should have swift justice, is so that the heart of man is not set to do evil. In terms of the actual anti-abortion legislation, whether there should be actual exceptions for rape and incest, those cases, I would say same thing. If you can't, there's zero difference in terms of innate inherent value between babies who are born to a loving couple, Christian family, babies who are born in a one-night stand, babies who are born from rape, babies who are born from incest, babies born with Down syndrome. They're all made in God's image equally, objectively, inherently. So we shouldn't have carve-outs in our law saying that some of them can be legally murdered and some can't.
Okay. Again, to me, it feels like that. And I think, by the way, Leslie, I'll just put this up here just so we can kind of wrap that up. She said, I didn't suggest adoption as a solution to abortion, just that adoption could be part of a broader. And I bring that up too, just to say that I think with everything you're talking about here, it's not always an either or. Adoption is important. And the same with, if you're talking about rape, the abolitionists are not saying that rape victims shouldn't be cared for and that there shouldn't be compassion for them. That's not what you're saying. But you are talking about the way to bring justice is not to take it out on the unborn baby.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Exactly. Yeah.
The other thing that I want to bring up here is just the issue of the gospel itself, because something that I just always feel stirring within me is I think it's great that, there are political endeavors like what you're talking about here. And we need that. We really do. Politics is part of the world God has created. And I think we need to hear what you're saying. And it's really actually exciting, that we're living in a time where these things are being discussed. On the other hand, there is a spiritual battle. And when we try to achieve these things, there are a lot of challenges to getting to where we want to be and where we should be. And I'm just thinking of where America's at spiritually right now. That I'm just kind of voicing out loud what I think. I could see there being violence even with opposition on this matter. So I think one thing I'd love to just hear is, what about the gospel and how does that play into the efforts that, you're involved with? I assume it's not like you're saying, if we just take care of the political, we don't even have to worry about the gospel. I think the gospel is definitely part of how you're approaching this, but I'd like to hear from you. How does that all fit together? The gospel and the political.
Yeah, so same thing with charity and with justice. There's no contrast between that. So there's no contrast between saying that murder should be illegal and saying that our nation needs to turn to Christ and take their past abortions to the cross and receive forgiveness, things of that nature. So I'd also say if you actually listen to abolitionists when they go before their lawmakers and argue for these bills, when in the bills themselves, there's usually language about the image of God. In our preambles for Foundation to Abolish Abortion, you'll usually find image of God language invoking scripture, invoking that sort of thing. So really what this is about is Christians doing what the prophets did, what John the Baptist did, and going to our civil magistrates and saying, God has appointed you as a minister of justice. Verses like Romans 13 actually call them deacons of God, right? Ministers of God for justice. They're supposed to bear the sword against the evildoer. 1 Peter 2, promote good and oppose evildoers, things of that nature. So this is a distinctly Christian activity. Just because it's political doesn't mean it's not distinctly Christian. If you actually, like I said, listen to committee hearings, you'll hear just pastors and everyday Christians invoking the Word of God or reading passages of Scripture. They're not trying to just leave their faith at the door. They're actually invoking and expecting to be honored the authority of Christ as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Mm-hmm. Revelation 1, ruler of the kings on earth. So this is not disconnected from Christ's power and authority and dominion. And like I said, there are 1 in 4 women in this culture are post-abortive, have had an abortion at some point in their life, And there's millions more who support abortion, and like First John reminds us, those who are murderers don't have eternal life abiding in them. So we absolutely need to impact the culture with the gospel. Groups like Abolitionist Rising are great examples, where their YouTube channel has a big reach, and they are just airing conversations about the gospel, about abortion, applying it to that issue. And you're seeing people in their comments saying, I changed my mind on abortion. I was converted because of this video. Super encouraging. But even Foundation to Abolish Abortion, our legislation, when we're talking about these things publicly and invoking the name of Christ, invoking the triune God, that does preach to the culture in and of itself. Our laws and our politics do tutor the culture as to what is acceptable conduct. So when there are bold Christians saying, you shall not murder, we need to repent as a nation for this evil we've allowed in our midst, that has an effect on the culture toward the gospel.
Yep.
Yeah. And again, the reason I bring up violence is because last time our country had an abolition movement,
Right.
it was violent for sure. And so I see, these things potentially, can be really, really deeply challenging to the stability of society. At the same time, I mean, you're talking about fundamental issues. You're talking about life itself and people made in the image of God. So I've prayed my whole life that there would be an end to abortion. And I know you guys are the same, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like over here, for years, Ireland was opposed to abortion. And sadly, maybe I think 4 or 5 years ago, we started to allow it. And we had, Jeff Durbin and some of the cohorts from Apologia came over, and they've started about end abortion now over here as well. So there's many of us that are behind those movements as well. And thankfully, kind of to like what Ben was saying, we don't have as many pro-life groups over here. Like, don't get me wrong, there's definitely pro-life Christians, but we don't have as many pro-life groups. So whenever we have something like end abortion now over here, they are definitely working very hard to end abortion in Ireland again, because it's going back to what Ben, you talked about a while ago, and I think the culture's done a very good job of almost indoctrinating people to believing that all women who have abortions are somehow victims. Yet many of the street preachers that I've spoken to, or you even see on YouTube, you quite literally have these women yelling in their face, I'm proud of my abortion, I've had 6 abortions, I know it's a baby. So these women are not victims. And I think, Ben, you even talked about it in your book, it's definitely an emotionally charged topic, but it's not one we should shy away from. And, if you're willingly and intentionally murdering a child in the womb, you are guilty of murder. So it's very simple.
Right. Absolutely.
Now,
and like I said, there's a range, right? So it's I agree with you. The vast majority are not victims. I've encountered women here in Philadelphia who, they're on their 7th, 8th abortion. There's one of those viral videos you're talking about was recorded by not me, but a guy who was with me that same morning. And she's saying, I don't care about a life, a pregnancy, none of that. I just want to F, right? That's what she was saying, walking into the abortion mill to murder her child. But then also in my experience, I've seen a woman dragged out of the back of a white van by, somebody who clearly was not her husband or boyfriend, didn't seem like that at all. And she was very dazed and confused. That's one of the instances where we've actually called the cops and said, we're not sure that she actually even wants to be here. But again, the vast majority, they know what they're doing. They know it's murder, and they're going to have to answer for that before God. And our laws should deter that conduct, and we should point them to Christ instead.
Agreed.
Now, with the pro-life movement, obviously, it's kind of in your interest to paint a contrast here with what you're doing and what's been happening. And clearly there's a lot of legitimacy to them not fulfilling what their stated goals are. That being said, have you observed or are you aware of any progress that actually has been made currently with pro-life groups? And I'm sure it's one of those things where ideally you want to really win out, but do you feel like the pro-life groups have had any success at all And I mean, even if it's because the abolition movement has kind of prodded them into maybe, hey, come on, you need to do something here. Have they had any success?
I think there's some of that that's happened, in terms of the abolition groups actually, steering them in the right direction. So when an abolition bill is proposed, you'll sort of see this in the book come up, is the next step is a slightly more aggressive pro-life law than usual is proposed instead. So, you sort of have that steel ball effect of shifting the Overton window when an abolition bill is actually introduced. And, there's pressure put on the pro-life groups saying we need to do more. In terms of actual success for the pro-life movement, I think it's pretty broadly recognized in conservative circles that they've sort of been wandering in the wilderness for a while, and especially after Roe was overturned, that's been made clear. So the vast majority of these ballot measures, even in deep red states like some of the ones we're talking about, have been lost because, again, they're not keeping the focus on the baby. They're trying to talk about women being victimized and sort of things that are ancillary or not quite focused on abortion and the baby getting murdered, losing that moral outrage. So I think they have in many ways actually failed to do their job. And in a lot of these states, we actually see abortions higher than under Roe. Even states like Texas, Oklahoma, that claim to ban abortion have new pro-life laws in effect, and yet there's actually more abortions because it's just driving demand for abortion pills and out-of-state travel, things of that nature. So I'm trying to be charitable. I don't want to just impugn everybody who's ever worked in the pro-life movement as not being serious about ending abortion, but I would say objectively the strategy just hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. On the good side, though, with equal protection bills, we had this year the most equal protection bills ever filed in a single session. We had the most bill sponsors. We had I think over 120 across the country. And I remember 4 or 5 years ago when I was at the Daily Wire and reporting on these bills, it would just be one or two guys who were really particularly bold in a certain state legislature who were supporting these bills. And now it's 20 plus Republicans in a single state will endorse the bill all at the same time. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely progress being made because there have been these failures. People are seeing that the conventional pro-life regulation approach isn't working out, and they know that we need something better. So they're willing to at least hear us out and in many cases get on board.
Awesome. And what about those then? So everyday Christians, what about if they want to get involved with this type of work, how can they get a start in that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So most states at this point have an abolition group at the state level. So here in Pennsylvania, it's Abolish Abortion PA. There's several more. There's End Abortion Ohio, Abolish Abortion Texas, Equal Protection South Carolina. So there's groups like that exist and do try to channel Christians within their states to go to the legislature, to send emails, make phone calls, knock doors for abolitionist candidates, activate the church in their states to end abortion. Those groups exist on that level. So certainly reach out to them. I'd encourage those who are in states that still have physical abortion mills to actually go to them. Even if you don't minister there every single day or every single weekend, at least go and see what it's like. Watch moms and dads walk in there on their own 2 feet and pay money to murder their children. And that I challenge you to actually, not care after that happens. That's sort of what happened in my life is, I had some friends bring me down and actually watch that happen. I've never been the same since. So I definitely encourage that too. And like we're saying, it's not just those are the only activities that are ways to oppose abortion. There's pregnancy centers, there's charity work, all sorts of things of that nature that people can use. Maybe if you're not inclined to evangelism or politics or something like that, there's still a number of ways to get involved in just being a Christian in your culture, according to your own gifts, according to your own resources. That's sort of an individual question, but I think we all should be doing something.
Awesome.
That's a really good way to put it. And on that note, in my local community, there are people who go out to the CVS pharmacy, I think at least a couple times a year, maybe a few times a year, because that's one of the places where people can access abortion pills. And they're still going out there and saying, hey, even this is not, it's not pro-life, it's not honoring to God. And I think it shows you with everything that you're talking about here, different people can do different things. You're not impugning everybody who calls themselves pro-life. You're just pointing out that the pro-life movement, politically speaking, has fallen short of its stated aims. Mm-hmm. And I actually wanted to clarify, because you said that a few minutes ago. I assume that that's partly because sometimes there's strategies that are just off, and then sometimes it's because they've kind of lost sight of what it is like. And what your movement is forcing people to do is really think about, what do you ultimately believe about the life of a child? Because I think we've been in the mode for so long of, if we could just reduce abortion, if we could just somehow overturn Roe v. Wade, and it did happen. Now we've got to ask the question, what are we actually trying to achieve here?
Right.
And I think a lot of us deep down, we really do want to see abortion abolished, but I think a lot of people lost hope that that could ever happen, and you're really trying to bring that back.
Yeah, the duty is ours. The results belong to God. We are not powerful enough to oppose abortion in this culture. I mean, we have 50 plus years, multiple generations of it being culturally and legally acceptable to murder your own child for whatever reason you want. That does not end overnight. That does not end without immense divine power, the power of the Holy Spirit working through Christ's church to actually overturn that. So nobody's under the delusion that this is some kind of political issue, some kind of easy fix. This is something that Christians should oppose, but do it with full trust and confidence in God's power to bless our labors. As long as the more we're obeying Him, the more we're trying to seek His will and to emulate in what we're doing. That's the extent to which He'll bless it, or we can at least expect Him to bless it, right? So instead of trying to sink into that fear mindset or that sort of pragmatic, like, well, it's impossible to end abortion, therefore we should sort of do what we can. That is not, if you read the Bible, that's not what the heroes of the faith did. You have like Jonathan, his armor bearer, who said, all right, there's two of us, let's go take on the Philistine army. Right. That sort of audacious faith attitude, right? Of, let the Lord, I think they said, let the Lord do what seems right to him. Something to that effect. Some really wonderful. I think that example was the Lord will save by many or by few, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are only a few thousand abolitionists that are really actively involved across the country. There's more who certainly have abolition ideas and are coming around to that view. But if you look at how just a handful of very small, under-resourced groups have forced the conversation to completely change across the entire nation around abortion, that's the fruit of faithfulness, not compromise. So I'd encourage, join us, right? Join us in repentance,
Right.
in obeying God, seeking to be Christians in a culture that murders its children, as T. Russell Hunter from Abolitionist Rising likes to say. And God will do great things, Lord willing, according to His will.
Amen to that.
That's right.
Amen.
And it just makes me think of, it is called abolition. And again, we can think of historically the abolition movement in regard to slavery. That would have seemed impossible at one time, that you could ever abolish slavery.
Mm-hmm.
This historic institution that's been part of humanity for millennia. And
Right.
yet now we just take it as a given. We don't have slavery and everybody thinks it's wrong. Why couldn't that happen with abortion, right? Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I love the optimism. I'll let you kind of give any closing thoughts, but before you do, too, I wanted to circle back to you mentioned that one of the things that kind of steered you to this viewpoint and interest in this was Abolition Rising, I think it was called.
Yes.
So is that I think I might have looked up the YouTube channel. Is that a YouTube channel?
Yep. So it's another 501c3 like Foundation to Abolish Abortion. They're based in Oklahoma. So they're right now their main focus is cultural outreach, right? So reaching the culture, having this mass outreach, injecting abolitionist ideas, biblical ideas about how to end abortion into the culture. So they have a huge following on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram, increasing on X, some of those channels. So that's what they mostly do.
Yep.
Okay. And I think if that's what I saw, I'm pretty sure it is. They're very it's a very effective approach
It is.
to engaging the culture, especially for the younger generations. Very provocative, but in a good way.
Yes.
They'll definitely really go for the jugular, so to speak, on issues from what I saw. Right? Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Ben, let me ask you a couple more questions just before Tim allows you to get your closing thoughts in. So this is your first book. How has it changed you in writing it, whether that be spiritually, journalistically, whatever way you went? Has it changed you? Has it not changed you? And has it increased your passion to write another book in the future?
Yeah, goodness. I have. So I just broke ground on a second book this week, actually. And I have two more I'd like to write in the next 5 years or so.
Okay.
Nice.
All, not directly about abortion, but, surrounding issues, things like
Mm-hmm.
that. I think there's a number of issues like that we need to be talking about as the American church. How did it change me? So again, I wrote the book about a year ago. But for me, it was just I kind of know that God made me to write. I love writing. Sort of like Doug Wilson has said, he writes for the same reason the dog barks. It's just what he's meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
I sort of put myself in the same camp. So this would be really wonderful, just in the sense of trying to honor God with the passions and the talents He's given me, and trying to bless the church with it. I try to pick a topic that hasn't been addressed. So there are other books that just argue for abolition as a concept. There's a book by Cowley called The Doctrine of Balaam. There's a book by Rusty Thomas called Biblical Strategies to Abolish Abortion. But this sort of journalistic approach hasn't been taken yet in a book like this. So that's why I chose this topic. And just, again, trying to honor the Lord with my passions, and, certainly not perfect in that, right? But, trying to do His will for my life. And I think I pray that He blesses it. And it's sort of in His hands at this point. But yeah.
Amen. Well, that leads directly into my second question. And so you pray the Lord blesses it, but what ideally would you want the legacy of this book to be 5 to 10 years down the line?
Yeah, absolutely. Just getting this into the hands of as many Christians as possible, legislators as possible, pastors as possible. Just offering the case. Maybe your mind isn't made up. Maybe you've heard some talk about abolition, but haven't really considered it. Well, okay, here's a book that gives you the case, and you can make up your mind. Here's concrete evidence to actually prove that we're not making this up.
Yeah.
And I love to see the conversation shift in especially these red states that are the low hanging fruit, or should be the low hanging fruit for actually abolishing abortion. Seeing them start to pass bills, and seeing these ideas continue to percolate.
Awesome. Thank you, brother.
So is there anything as we kind of wind down here that you want to really leave the audience with, just as kind of a closing statement, or just points that you want to drive home?
Yeah, I want to thank the handful of people who've been commenting, who maybe aren't entirely convinced of what I'm saying. I appreciate the engagement, and really am thankful for it. And I think these are conversations we should continue having in good faith. And I'm trying the best I possibly can to do that. But if you're not convinced, maybe just consider picking up a copy of the book, seeing the evidence for yourself. I wrote it for somebody like that who hasn't made up their mind quite yet. I'll point you towards some other resources real quick as we close. Foundation to Abolish Abortion has a docuseries called Abortion Free. It's just abortionfree.com. Those are all on YouTube for free as well. But it just walks through where we are post-Roe, where the culture is, where the legislation is. It's pretty engaging material. It's not just a boring, here's a bunch of bills you need to read through. So that's another great resource for people. Other groups like End Abortion Now, Abolitionist Rising, Operation Save America is another one that does a lot of on-the-ground political work. So encourage folks to reach out to them, and of course to their state level abolition groups. And overall, just go before God in prayer, and read the Bible in light of how does God treat this issue of the murder of innocent children under cover of law, and just ask Him, what would you have me do? How should I use my time, my talent, my treasure to serve you in this way? In addressing the greatest moral issue of our day, an issue that invokes the judgment of God on countless nations throughout history, and has now grips, the United States, Ireland, right, other countries across the Western world. Because God hates the hands that shed innocent blood. He hates the cultures that shed innocent blood, and He hears that innocent blood. He's going to execute judgment sooner or later. If not in this age, and then most certainly in the next, on the last day.
Yep.
And yeah, if anybody's listening to this who has murdered their child, and maybe hasn't reconciled that guilt, go to the cross. Jesus Christ died for murderers. Jesus died for David, who killed Bathsheba's husband. Jesus died for Moses, who killed the Egyptian slave driver. It's not the first time you saved a murderer. It's not the last time. So if you have that repressed guilt and shame from abortion, just take it to the cross. Jesus Christ came and died to save sinners. So I'll leave it there.
Amen.
Thank you. That's the author of the book Forsakers of the Fatherless that we've been talking to today. Ben Zeisloft, and this is where you can purchase the book at the
Ministries.
Founders Ministries. Yes, and actually, once again, I'm going to also, if I can get it up here,
He's remembered.
put the discount code. There we go. You can get a discount on the book. It's about to come out. It's as we're recording this, it's not quite out yet, but you can order it now. And if you use Layman at the website you see there, they'll give you 10% off of the book price, which is fantastic.
Yep.
And I think you've given us a lot of incentives today to read this book. So I really hope people will.
Yeah, I'm nearly finished it, and I can honestly say I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So
awesome,
great, brother.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate that it is a journalistic approach. Like you said, that's complementing other works that have been done on this issue. You're really going into the specific situations that are happening on the ground politically and how they've been playing out. And yes, you are critical of the pro-life movement, but you're making a case for why that is. We didn't state this before, actually. This book is not a full defense of the abolition position. It's a journalistic inquiry into what's been happening politically speaking. But is it Devers at the beginning? Is that his name? Who writes the? He gives a little bit more of a defense of the position itself. But just so people are aware of that, the book is not aiming to give a full-fledged outlined position on abolition.
People in my audience would be more familiar with Dusty Devers, so I'm sure they know of his work, and Ben, they know of you as well. So yeah,
it's great.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, everyone in the audience. Really great having you with us. We're so glad that we got to interact with you, and people who are watching in the future, the recording of this. We hope that you've enjoyed this and that you'll also leave comments too. We want to keep the conversation going. This is a really important issue, and share this video with others so that we can keep getting the word out about this issue and about Ben's book. And thank you again, Ben, for spending the time with us.
And Ben, before we do go, where can people find you? X, Instagram?
Yep, you can find me at both X and Instagram at Ben Zeisloft. I'm much more active on X, not so much on Instagram. And then you can also check out the Foundation to Abolish Abortion at faa.life. That's our website. And then Abortion Free is abortionfree.com.
Awesome. Appreciate it, brother.
Very good. And I'm going to say goodbye to the audience now. We'll let you guys go.
Peace,
again,
guys.
Thank you so much for being here. And we'll hopefully we'll be here next week, Nicholas and I, talking about some other important theological issue. God bless you all.